For a little background to this story, I was a young woman at the time living in my second apartment since graduating college. This place was a lot nicer than my first, which had been kind of a dump, so I was very excited to move into a much nicer building. This one was only a few years old and costed a lot more than my old place. I had gotten a pretty good job the previous year though, so I was finally able to afford it. It was an apartment complex of several buildings all next to each other. My place was on the third floor of the second building. I got moved in and then settled in pretty quickly. I was really enjoying living in a decent apartment building. Then, about just a week or two into living there, I came home from work one day to find an envelope on my door. It was kind of shoved in the crack between the door and the frame. I figured that it was something from management, but I didn't know what. I took it and went inside. However, when I opened the envelope, there was a handwritten note inside. It said something like, "Welcome to the apartment. It's great to have you here. I hope you enjoy it. From your neighbor." When I read it, I thought that it was really nice, and I figured it was probably from one of my next door neighbors, or maybe my neighbor across the hallway. It did not say who it was from though, which I found a little bit strange. Nevertheless, I was glad to live in a place with such welcoming people, although to that point I had not met anybody else there yet. A couple of days later, I was leaving for work, and I happened to see a neighbor leaving her apartment as well. It was an older woman, and I thought that maybe she had written the note. So I said hi to her and asked her, but she said that she did not. I asked her if she knew who did, but she didn't know. It was kind of a mystery, but overall not too big of a deal. A few days after this, I got another note though. I once again came home to find a note on my door, and when I read this one, it was an invitation to meet. The note said something like, "I'd love to have you over for some coffee to welcome you to the building." Then it gave their apartment number. Now, for some reason, I was under the impression that it was maybe an older woman or just a woman in general. The way that it was written and the handwriting style and all that gave me the impression. Plus, the paper that it was written on had flower designs on it. The letter also said that I could drop by any time. So based on the fact that this person kept sending me notes, it seemed like they wanted to meet me. I wasn't sure why they hadn't just knocked on my door themselves when I was home. But anyways, one evening I went to go say hi and introduce myself. However, it was really strange, because their apartment number was not by mine at all. In fact, it wasn't even on my floor. It was located on the first floor and on the complete opposite end of the building. It was almost as far as you could possibly be from my place. So how on earth did this person ever even see me or know who I was and where I lived? Still, I knocked on the door. Soon after, a man answered. I was surprised to see him, as like I said, I thought it would be a woman. He invited me inside, and I instantly got a bad vibe from him. He was sort of short and had an uneven beard. I asked him if he was the one who left the notes, and he said yes. I told him thanks, and that it was very nice, and I had wanted to meet the person who had wrote them. He said that I should sit down and make myself at home, and he would get me a drink. I said that I was on my way out, which I had made up on the spot. He seemed upset by that, and I caved and said that I would stay for just a couple of minutes. So I sat down in his place, which seemed pretty average. I was kind of curious as to why he left the note. I asked him how long he had lived there and how he had noticed me because my apartment was so far from his. The guy claimed that he had lived there for years, and he welcomed everyone new into the building, which made me feel a bit better. Then he asked me how I liked working at my job, and then mentioned the exact company that I worked for. I had no idea how he would know this information. There would be literally no way to know that at all. I played it off, and I just said that it was good, and then said that I had to be going. That really creeped me out how he knew that. The man seemed disappointed that I said I had to go, but I didn't care. I left, and then went back to my place. I got back to my apartment and hoped that I would not get any more notes and would never run into that guy again. He really gave me the creeps. About a week went by and nothing happened. I had mostly forgot about the whole thing. But then, one night, I was at home by myself and it was pretty late. Things were quiet and I heard someone walking down the hallway. I thought nothing of it, as this was obviously an everyday occurrence. However, the footsteps seemed to stop right outside my door. Sure, it could have been the neighbor across the hallway, which I figured it was. But I didn't hear a door open. It was like the footsteps just stopped. So I was curious, and I quietly tiptoed over to the door. Then I looked through the peephole. When I did, I saw that same man standing there outside my door. He was just looking at the door like he was debating whether to knock on it or try opening it or something. It was locked, but the man did not try to open it. Instead, I saw him lean in and put his ear to the door as if to try to listen. I kept still and literally held my breath. I didn't think he knew I was right on the other side, but I didn't know for sure. For the next minute or so, it was just him and I, not moving or making a sound. Then, finally, he backed up. I saw him walk away down the hallway a few seconds later. I finally could relax a little bit. I considered reporting him to management, and I should have, but I didn't. I was just hoping that I would not see him again. I never went by his apartment, and I never really had a reason to either. I was also more careful all the time, but I never noticed anything suspicious. Then, after not seeing him for about a month, I ran into another neighbor and decided to bring the situation up. She knew who I was talking about and hadn't got any notes from him herself, but she said that she had talked to him once and he seemed like a creep. She also said that he actually had just recently been evicted from the building for not paying his rent. That was a huge relief to me. After that, I never saw him or heard from him again. But it still creeps me out how he knew where I worked. Either he looked me up online and somehow found it out, or he must have followed me to work. Which one, I'm not sure, but I'm hoping that it was not the latter. Either way, I hope I never see that guy again. I live alone in a house that I'm currently renting. I don't know any of the neighbors at all. It's a populated neighborhood where the yards are small and there are many houses in rows. Not too long after I moved in, one time I ordered something online to be delivered. However, I never received it, even after it said it had been delivered. Nothing was there and I had no photos of the delivery from the company, so I assumed that it must have been sent to my old address or something by accident. If that was the case, I would not have been able to get it as that was too far away, so I decided to just order it again. A few days later, when it was delivered, I didn't know it had been delivered yet, but it was there. I was upstairs on the second floor of my place when I noticed something through a front window. I saw a woman exit the house directly across the street from mine. She then walked through her front yard and basically made a beeline to my front yard. She then proceeded to walk right through the yard and up to my front step. I was just standing there watching her, and I don't think she knew I was there because she never once looked at me. I thought that she was going to knock on the door, but for what reason I did not know. She went out of my sight when she got up to the front step because I couldn't see that from my angle. But instead of knocking on the door, I saw her then come back into my view seconds later, walking away and holding a package. I realized that was my delivery and she was walking away really fast. My neighbor had just stole my package. I took off running out of the room and down the stairs. When I got to the front door though, the woman was already across the street and entering her house. By the time I opened the door, she had just got inside. I marched right over there and then banged on her front door. Moments later, she answered it, looking all confused. She was opening the door just a crack, like she was all defensive, and just stuck her head around the corner. It was like she was ready to slam the door shut at a moment's notice. I told her that I just saw her take my package and steal it. The woman then claimed that it was her package and it had been delivered to my house by mistake. Not knowing 100% if my package had in fact been delivered yet, I stopped and thought for a moment. She got me to actually doubt myself there for a second, but then I told her that I had just ordered a package and it was supposed to be delivered that day and should be there by now. The woman told me once more that no, it was hers and that she knew nothing about my packages. Then she said that she had to go and slammed the door shut and locked it really loud. I then went on my phone and checked my email. Sure enough, it said that my package had just been delivered about 30 minutes earlier, and there was no package there now. I knew she had stole it, so I then banged on the door and told her that I knew she stole my package. She didn't answer though. I tried to reason with her. I yelled from the front step that if she could show me the package with her name on it, I would leave her alone, but she still didn't answer. I stood there knocking on the door on and off for like 10 minutes, but she refused to come to the door again. I was so mad. I didn't want to do anything crazy, so I cooled down and then calmly walked back to my place. That explained why I didn't get my delivery the first time, because she had stolen that one too. I realized that I needed to figure out how to stop this woman. I thought about calling the cops, but then decided to give her one last opportunity to come clean, because after all, calling the cops on a neighbor can start a whole mess, and she probably wouldn't get in that much trouble for stealing one $30 package from me twice. So I went back to her house the following day. As to be expected, she did not answer, so I left a note. It said, "I know you stole my packages. You have 48 hours to come clean before I get the cops involved. Sincerely, your neighbor." Well, later that day, I got a knock at my door. I thought that it would be the woman, but when I opened it, it wasn't her. It was some man. I'd never seen him before, but he said that he was the husband of the woman across the street. He said that she was terribly upset because I had accused her of stealing, and he knew that she was innocent. He tried to lecture me about making a false police report and accusing others of stealing. I tried to tell him my evidence, which was clear as day, but he would have none of it. He stormed off, claiming that if I got the cops involved, He would, quote, make my life miserable, whatever that means. Now, I should have just gone to the cops right then and there, but that encounter made me want to try to catch the woman in the act. So I went out and bought a security camera and positioned it on my front step. Then I ordered a package and purposely left it out for several days. However, I got no luck. I realized that she probably saw the camera, possibly even saw me installing it, because the camera only showed the front step and then part of the front yard and driveway. It didn't reach the street or the neighbor's property, so she very well could have been on her way over to steal again and then noticed it. I tried to hide it, but there were really no great hiding places to make it impossible to see. But at least this would stop her from stealing in the future. For a few weeks, things were fine. I never saw her or her husband or anything. I decided to just let the matter go, as angry as I still was about it. Then, one night, I arrived home pretty late. When I did, for whatever reason, I glanced over across the street. There was one light on in a front window. I saw the woman just staring at me from inside with this angry look on her face. She was just glaring right at me. When we made eye contact, she didn't look away or anything. I turned away and then walked inside. But when I got to a front window in the house and looked out, I saw that she was still staring at my house. She was just glaring at it with an angry face. It was really creepy. She remained like that for about 10 minutes. Then she finally moved away and covered her window. I guess that she was pouting because she couldn't steal any more of my packages. That was the last time I saw her. I haven't seen her or her husband since then, and that was almost a year ago now. I'm not aware of them moving out, as the same car is still in their driveway, but I haven't seen them in any capacity. That's probably a good thing, and I probably won't live here too much longer as I'm looking at places across town. I hope that I never see that woman again. I live alone in an apartment. I've lived here for approximately 2 years now. The scariest thing that ever happened in my time living here took place 6 months in. To describe my apartment, it's an average good place, I would say. The building is about 10 years old maybe. It has pretty new technology, and it's overall pretty clean and well maintained. I live on the second floor of a 5-floor building, and I have lots of neighbors. However, I never have met any of them. Occasionally, I will see or hear people walking down the hallway. Sometimes I see the same people here and there, but I have never got to know any of them or anything like that. It's not a big deal though, as I have friends, just not any who live in the building, I guess. Anyways, one evening I got home from work like any other. I got up to my floor and then walked down the hallway to my room. However, when I got there, I took out my key fob and held it up to the door to unlock it. But when I did, I heard the door make the locking sound instead of the unlocking sound. This meant that the door had actually been unlocked and I had now just locked it, which gave me a bad feeling, as I realized I must have forgotten to lock the door that morning when I left for work. I didn't know how that was possible, but I guess it was. Locking the door when I leave is just something that I do without thinking, so I couldn't say for certain if I had in fact locked it that morning. I walked into my place now feeling paranoid. However, nothing seemed out of place. The lights were also all off how I left them, so I felt better. I figured that I just forgot to lock the door and that was it. I went on with my routine. I went in my bedroom and then changed out of my work clothes. Right when I was about done changing though, I suddenly heard the front door to my apartment open and then moments later it closed. I knew that someone had been in my place. I ran to my bedroom door and looked out, but I saw no one. They must have left. I went to my front door, which was now unlocked again. I looked through my peephole but saw no one. Then I opened my door and looked out to the hallway. When I did, just barely for a second, I saw somebody entering the apartment directly next to mine. It was a ways down the hallway, and it was so fast that I could barely see them. It appeared to be a man, and he quickly went inside. The total time that I saw him was maybe half a second. I didn't recognize him, but very quickly his door shut and he was gone. There was no one else around. So it pretty much had to be him who had been in my place. The hallway was long and straight, so there would be no other places for anybody to hide. I thought about going over there and knocking on his door, but I was too creeped out to do it. I really didn't know what to do. I went around my apartment and looked in every room. Nothing was stolen or out of place to my knowledge at all. I came to the realization that the man must have been inside my apartment, probably hiding in the coat closet, and I had walked right past him. Another crazy thing is that when I was leaving that morning, I literally almost took my jacket from that coat closet. However, I told myself that the weather was warm enough to leave my jacket and I would be fine without it. I ended up regretting it when I was out that day, as it was colder than I thought, but if I had in fact took my jacket, the first thing I would have done after arriving home would have been to put it in that coat closet, and then I would have come face to face with that guy. And that's the only hiding place that really makes sense as to where he was. But why was he in there? I have no idea. I still can't believe that it happened. I sent an email to management about it, and they said they would look into the matter. However, I personally never heard anything back. But maybe a month or two after the incident, I was leaving my place one day and I noticed some new people moving furniture into that same apartment next door. So I guess the guy was now gone. I don't even know who he was. I had no clue what he looked like. I just simply said I saw a man go into that apartment. So maybe he got evicted, maybe it was just a coincidence. But I still live here, and I'm always very careful to make sure that I lock the door. I live with my wife in a very quiet neighborhood. We're a little bit out in the country and have lived here for years. I know a good number of my neighbors, but not all of them, obviously. The houses are a little bit more spread out, and the yards are rather large, with some woods around. Most of the yards are several acres or more. A few years ago, I was at home with my wife one night, and it was rather late. In fact, I was about to go to bed in a couple of minutes when I heard a knock at the front door. This was highly unusual. Being out here in the country, seldom do we ever get door-to-door salesmen or anything like that, but especially not at 11 o'clock at night. I headed over to see who on earth could possibly be there at this hour. My wife told me not to even answer the door, but I was curious. I opened it, and I saw a young man standing there. I had never seen him before in my life. He looked to be maybe in his mid-20s and wore a sweatshirt and jeans. He said hi, and then said that he was my neighbor from down the street. He proceeded to tell me that he had accidentally locked himself out of his house. Then he asked me if I wouldn't mind letting him stay at my house for the night. I told him that I would mind, and I asked him why he didn't just call a locksmith or the police, or just break back in there. The man claimed that he had called a locksmith, but they wouldn't be out until morning, and he didn't want to break anything. I asked him how he even locked himself out. I'm not even sure how that's possible, because I locked my door from the outside with my key. The guy said that he didn't even know, but his keys were inside and his doors were all locked. He wasn't really making much sense, and this situation was seeming really suspicious. I also noticed as I was standing there talking to the young man that there was a car parked on the side of the street a ways down that was running. I asked him if that was his car and pointed at it, and he said no, he didn't know who that was. It was pretty unusual for a car to park on the side of the street because of the driveways being long and it also being a quiet area. This was also highly unusual. I told the guy that he couldn't stay at our place, so he would have to get to Steppen. He practically begged me and claimed that he had asked all the other neighbors and I was his last hope. That also made no sense because we were not like the last house on the street or anything. We were kind of in the middle, so why would he randomly go to our house last? I wasn't buying a cent of this guy's crap. I told him to get a hotel, and he said that he didn't have any money as his wallet was in his house. This guy had an excuse for everything. I finally told him to get lost or I would call the cops, and he finally gave up and said okay. I shut the door and the guy then walked off down the driveway. I stayed at the window and watched the guy though to see where he would go. He walked out into the street and then walked right up to the car that was parked on the side of the road. He then proceeded to get in the back seat of it and then the car drove away. I was not surprised. That guy was definitely up to no good. I called the police non-emergency line and reported it. I'm hoping that he didn't get anybody else to fall for his trick. I never heard anything more regarding it, but I'm really glad that I didn't let him into my house. I'm not sure what would have happened if I had let him stay the night like he wanted. Things like that happening in our area are very unusual. I probably shouldn't have even answered the door. I probably should have just listened to my wife. But needless to say, that guy did not even live in our neighborhood. This is something that happened many years ago when I was a kid. I think I was around 12 years old. I just remember that one day there was some type of problem at my middle school. I think the electricity in the building went out or something, and it had to be fixed. So we got out of school for the day, and I got to stay home. But we went back the following day. However, it was really nice to have a random day off like that. My older brother was in high school, so he still had to go, and my parents both had work. So on that day that I had off, I was left home alone that day. I had already woke up early as I was expecting to go to school, and after everybody left, I wasn't tired right away. So I went into the living room and I sat on the couch and just started watching TV. Probably about an hour into my unexpected day off, I heard something from outside. It sounded like footsteps of somebody right outside our house, like they were going to the front door. I looked over out the window from where I was on the couch. From there, I could see a man who was our next-door neighbor. He lived in the house just to the left of ours, and I had never talked to him or anything, but I had seen him a few times and I knew who he was. I saw him go up to our front step and figured that he was going to knock on the door. I didn't feel like answering it though, and I figured that I would be no help, so I didn't have plans to answer the door. He probably wanted my parents anyways. However, he did not knock on the door. I saw him walk up to the door and stand there, and then he tried to open it. I was sitting in a spot that he probably could not see me at, and he didn't look in my direction either. In fact, I could barely see him from where he was next to the door, but I heard him try to open it. This was pretty weird. Then I heard him walking away. At that point, I was confused, so I got up and went over to the door. I looked out, and I thought that I would see him walking back to his house. But no. Instead, he walked around our house like he was going to the backyard. Then I moved to a rear window, and I was careful not to let him see me. Our next-door neighbor then went into our backyard. He walked over to the back door to our house and then tried to open it. That one was also locked though. I was really confused as to what he was doing. He then walked around a bit in our backyard and was looking at the house. After standing there momentarily, he walked over to a window. I thought that he might try to break it or something, and I was getting really freaked out by this. He walked up to the window and appeared to look in. I ducked down so as to not be seen, even though I was at a different window. I didn't hear anything then, but when I looked back, he wasn't at the window anymore. I saw him then casually walking back to his house, and then he went inside. For the rest of the time that I was home alone that day, he did not return, and I didn't see him outside or anything. Eventually, my brother got home from school, and my parents got home from work. I told them about it, and they thought it was really weird, but didn't seem to take it that serious. They chalked it up to maybe he was just wondering if anybody was home and wanted to borrow something. They didn't believe that he actually tried to open the door. Although my parents were not that close with our neighbor, they talked to him several times and felt that he wouldn't do something like that. After that event, I'm not aware of anything else like it happening. The man moved out like a few years later. I don't think he ever did anything like that again, but I know what I saw and I know what I heard, and I still don't know why he did that. I'm assuming that he just didn't know that I was home and thought that the house was empty. I just don't know why he would try to break in like that.